The massive ships appeared in Earth's sky without warning. They were bigger than mountains, black as space itself, and they moved with the slow certainty of death. Commander HFY stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the blue and green world below. His forearms moved across the control panels with practiced ease. His large black eyes showed no emotion as he studied the data streaming across his screens. "Status report," he said in his clicking language. "Scanning complete." "Commander," replied his second officer, Veltar. "Population approximately 8 billion. Bipedal mammals. Tool users. Technology level is primitive as expected." HFY nodded his elongated head. This was going to be easy. The Kethmori had done this operation hundreds of times across dozens of worlds. Find a primitive species, take the strongest ones, break their will, turn them into workers for the great mines and factories of the hegemony. These humans looked perfect for the job. The scans showed they were spread across one small world, fighting each other with crude weapons. They had no space travel beyond. Their own moon. No energy shields, no plasma weapons. Just simple metal projectiles and chemical explosives. "Begin Phase 1, HFY commanded. Across the fleet of 50 harvester ships, the same orders echoed. Thousands of Kethmori soldiers prepared their equipment. Neural suppression collars were loaded into transport pods. Capture nets were tested and armed. Everything had to be perfect for a clean harvest. The Kethmori had learned long ago that quick, overwhelming force was the key to successful slave gathering. Hit hard, hit fast, and break their spirit before they could organize resistance. Most species surrendered within hours once they saw the futility of fighting back. "Deployment zones selected," reported the tactical officer. "Major population, centers identified. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, Beijing. Capturing these areas will net us approximately 50 million specimens." HFY felt satisfaction ripple through his chest plates. 50 million slaves would be more than enough to meet their quota. The mining operations on Kepler 442b needed fresh workers, and humans looked strong enough to last several years before wearing out. "Begin descent," he ordered. The first wave of harvester pods broke away from the main ships. Each pod was the size of a city block, designed to land in populated areas and deploy capture fields that would paralyze any resistance. The neural suppression technology had never failed. Once the collars were attached, the specimens became docile and obedient. HFY watched his screens as the pods descended through Earth's atmosphere. Everything looked normal. The humans below seemed unaware of what was coming. Their primitive communications networks were already being jammed by Kethmori technology. The first pod landed in what the humans called Central Park in New York City. Immediately, the suppression field activated, sending waves of neural static. Across several city blocks, capture teams poured out of the pod, each soldier equipped with collars and stunning weapons. But something was wrong. "Commander," Veltar's voice carried a note of confusion, "the neural suppression is not working properly." HFY's eyes narrowed as he studied the feeds from the capture teams. The humans were not falling unconscious as they should. Instead, they were running and screaming. Some were even fighting back. "Impossible," HFY muttered. "The suppression field works on all known nervous systems." On his screen, he watched a human in some kind of uniform point a crude weapon at one of his soldiers. The projectile that came from the weapon hit the Kethmori trooper's shield and penetrated it. The soldier fell to the ground, blue blood spreading across the grass. "Report!" HFY barked. "Sir, their weapons are penetrating our defensive shields," came the panicked voice of the ground team leader. "These metal projectiles are not being stopped by our energy barriers." This made no sense. Kethmori shields were designed to deflect energy weapons and plasma bolts. No species they had encountered used solid projectiles as primary weapons. It was too primitive, too inefficient. More reports flooded in from other landing sites. In London, human aircraft were attacking the harvester pods with explosive weapons. In Tokyo, ground forces were using vehicles mounted with rapid-fire projectile weapons. In Moscow, something the humans called tanks were rolling toward the landing zones. "How many casualties?" Zexhai demanded. 43 dead, over 100 wounded, Veltar reported, his voice shaking. "Commander, they are fighting with coordination we did not expect. Their military response time is unprecedented." Zexhai studied the tactical displays. The humans were not behaving like any species the Keth Mori had encountered before. Most civilizations took hours or even days to organize a response to alien contact. These humans had military units engaging his forces within minutes of the first landing. "Sir," another officer called out, "we are detecting massive energy signatures from their orbital installations." "What orbital installations?" Zexhai snapped. Intelligence reported no significant space-based defenses. "These appear to be weapons platforms, sir, hidden on their moon and in orbit around their planet." Suddenly, streaks of light began rising from Earth's surface. The primitive missiles looked slow and clumsy compared to Keth Mori technology, but there were hundreds of them. Thousands. "Evasive maneuvers," Zexhai ordered. The first missile struck the harvester ship Torvex, instead of the minor damage expected. From a primitive chemical explosive, the ship's entire port section erupted in flames. The missile had been carrying some kind of nuclear warhead. "They have atomic weapons!" Veltar screamed. Zexhai's blood ran cold. Nuclear weapons meant these humans understood controlled fusion. That was not primitive technology. That was the foundation of galactic civilization. More missiles struck the fleet. The humans were not launching random attacks. They were targeting specific systems, hitting the ship's weakest points with surgical precision. Someone was guiding these weapons with detailed knowledge of Keth Mori ship design. "Sir, we have a problem," the communications officer reported. "One of our soldiers has been captured alive. The humans are... They are taking him apart." "Taking him apart?" "Yes, sir. They appear to be studying his equipment and biology in real time. They have already figured out how to operate his weapon." This was impossible. Keth Mori technology was centuries ahead of anything these humans should understand. It took most species years of study to even begin comprehending alien technology. Zexhai watched in horror as more reports came in. Human soldiers were not just defending their positions. They were advancing. Some had somehow made it aboard the grounded harvester pods and were fighting Keth Mori troops in hand-to-hand combat. And they were winning. "Commander," Veltar said quietly, "what are your orders?" Zexhai looked at the tactical display. In less than 3 hours, his force had gone from confident invaders to desperate defenders. 7 harvester ships were severely damaged. 3 had been completely destroyed. Casualty reports showed over 500 Keth Mori dead and wounded. The humans had lost thousands, but they kept fighting. They did not break. They did not surrender. Every time his forces gained ground, more human reinforcements appeared with heavier weapons. "Sir," the sensor operator called out, "we are detecting human aircraft approaching from multiple directions. These appear to be different from their previous fighters." Zexhai looked at the new contacts on his screen. These aircraft were larger, more heavily armed. As he watched, they began launching new types of missiles that seemed to adjust, their course in flight tracking his ships like living things. "Guided weapons," he whispered. "They have artificial intelligence." The first smart missile struck the harvester ship Kolmek directly in its command center. The explosion was so powerful it could be seen from the surface. The ship broke apart and fell into Earth's ocean in burning pieces. "Commander, we must retreat," Veltar urged. "This is not going according to plan." But Zexhai was staring at something else on his screens. Human ground forces had reached one of the crash sites and were pulling Keth Mori technology from the wreckage. As he watched, human engineers began connecting alien power cells to their own equipment. "They are reverse engineering our technology," he said in disbelief. "In real time. This was supposed to be a simple harvest operation. take slaves from a primitive world and leave. But these humans were not primitive. They were not helpless. They were dangerous in ways the Keth Mori had never encountered. "Sir, incoming transmission from the surface," the communications officer reported. "From who?" "The humans, sir. They are broadcasting on our frequencies." Zexhai felt his stomach turn cold. The humans had cracked Keth Mori communications in less than 4 hours. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers spoke broken but understandable galactic standard. "Attention, alien vessels. This is General Rodriguez of the United Earth Defense Force. You have attacked our world without provocation. Surrender now, and we will allow you to leave. Continue this aggression, and we will destroy every one of your ships." Zexhai almost laughed. Surrender to primitives? It was unthinkable. But as he looked at his tactical displays, he realized the humans were not making an empty threat. They had already proven they could destroy his ships. How did they learn our language so quickly? Veltar asked. "The same way they learned everything else," Zexhai replied grimly. "They adapt." Another wave of missiles rose from Earth's surface. This time they were moving faster and turning more sharply. The humans had improved their weapons in the few hours since the battle began. "All ships, prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace," Zexhai ordered. "Sir, we cannot abandon the ground teams," Veltar protested. Zexhai closed his eyes. Standard Keth Mori doctrine was clear. If a harvest operation failed, ground teams were expendable. But looking at these humans, he suspected his soldiers would not live long enough to be rescued anyway. "Begin jump sequence," he commanded. As the surviving Keth Mori ships prepared to flee Earth's system, Zexhai received one final report from the surface. Human forces had captured a complete harvester pod intact, along with all its technology and several live Keth Mori prisoners. The primitives now had access to interstellar technology. Zexhai realized with growing horror that this was not the end of the conflict. This was just the beginning. Dr. Sarah Chen had been studying marine biology when the aliens arrived. Now, 18 hours after the first attack, she found herself staring at the body of a dead alien soldier in a makeshift laboratory beneath the Pentagon. The creature was tall and thin, with gray skin that felt like leather. 4 arms ending in hands with 3 fingers each, large black eyes that took up most of its face. No visible ears or nose, just small slits in the skull. "This is incredible," she whispered to Colonel Martinez, who stood beside her wearing full combat gear. "Look at the bone structure, the muscle density. They are built for low-gravity environments." "Can you tell us how to kill them more efficiently?" Martinez asked bluntly. Sarah looked up from her examination. "Colonel, this is the first proof of alien life in human history. Should we not be trying to communicate with them?" Martinez pointed toward the ceiling, where they could still hear the distant sound of explosions. "Doctor, they came here to take us as slaves. Communication failed when they started shooting." Sarah nodded reluctantly and returned to her work. The aliens' equipment was scattered across several tables. The weapon looked like a rifle, but it fired bursts of energy instead of bullets. The armor was some kind of flexible metal that could stop small arms fire but had failed against larger caliber weapons. Most interesting was the collar-like device that had been attached to the alien's neck. "This is some kind of neural interface," Sarah explained, running her hands over the strange metal band. "See these contact points? They would press against the spine and brainstem. I think this is how they control their slaves." "Can we use it on them?" Martinez asked. "I do not know. Their nervous system is completely different from ours. But, Colonel, we captured 3 of them alive upstairs. If I could examine them—" Martinez shook his head. "Too dangerous. The CIA boys are questioning them now." Through the walls, Sarah could hear muffled screaming. She tried not to think about what kind of questioning was happening. "Doctor," Martinez said, "I need to know everything about their technology." Our boys are fighting them with World War II tactics, and it is barely working. We need an edge. Sarah nodded and picked up the alien weapon. It was lighter than it looked, perfectly balanced in her hands. The trigger mechanism was designed for three-fingered hands, but she could make it work. The power cell is here, she said, pointing to a glowing cylinder in the weapon's stock. Some kind of miniature fusion battery. This single cell probably contains more energy than a car engine produces in a year. Can we copy it? Copy it? Colonel, this technology is decades ahead of anything we have, maybe centuries. It would take our best scientists years just to understand how it works. But even as she said it, Sarah was already forming ideas. The power cell connected to the weapon through a simple interface. If they could not copy the technology, maybe they could steal it. Above them, the building shook as another explosion echoed through the city. The aliens had retreated to orbit, but they were still launching attacks. Smaller ships were hitting targets around the world, trying to rescue their stranded soldiers. "Doctor?" a new voice called from the doorway. Sarah turned to see a young lieutenant covered in dust and blood. "General Rodriguez wants to see you immediately." They made their way through corridors filled with running soldiers and emergency lights. The Pentagon had become a war zone command center overnight. Every room was filled with people shouting orders, studying maps, and coordinating the global defense effort. General Rodriguez stood in front of a massive wall display showing the tactical situation around the world. Red dots marked alien positions. Blue dots showed human forces. The picture was not encouraging. "Dr. Chen," Rodriguez said without turning around, "what can you tell me about their technology?" "Their weapons use directed energy. Their armor is advanced but not invulnerable. Their ships seem to have some kind of energy shielding that stops our missiles but not our bullets." "Why bullets and not missiles?" Sarah thought about that. "I think their shields are designed to stop energy weapons and high-velocity projectiles. Our missiles travel fast and carry electronic guidance systems. Their shields can detect and deflect them, but bullets are just chunks of metal moving relatively slowly. The shields do not see them as threats." Rodriguez finally turned to face her. His uniform was torn and his face was covered in cuts. "We shot down 2 of their small ships over Nevada. Our people are taking them apart right now. How long before we can understand their technology?" "Sir, with respect, that is not how scientific research works. This technology is completely alien. It could take decades to—" "Doctor," Rodriguez interrupted, "we do not have decades. We have reports of more alien ships heading toward Earth. A lot more ships. We need to level the playing field, and we need to do it fast." On the wall display, new contacts were appearing at the edge of the solar system. Dozens of them. The aliens were bringing reinforcements. "There is something else," Rodriguez continued. "We intercepted some of their communications. Our computer specialists are working on translation, but we think we understand the basic message." He pressed a button, and alien voices filled the room. The sounds were like clicking and chirping, completely unlike any human language. "What are they saying?" Sarah asked. "Near as we can tell, they are calling for help. Not military help. They are asking for slave-handling specialists and psychologists. They think we are too aggressive to be useful as workers." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "They want to break us, turn us into docile servants." "That is what they do, Doctor. We found records in their ships. They have enslaved dozens of species across the galaxy. Entire civilizations reduced to cattle." The wall display flickered and changed to show images captured from alien computers, pictures of other worlds, other species, all of them wearing the same collar devices Sarah had examined downstairs. Some looked like giant insects, others were reptilian, a few were almost human-like, but with fur or scales. All had the same empty, defeated expression in their eyes. "My God," Sarah whispered. "How many?" "Billions," Rodriguez replied. "Maybe trillions. This Kethamori hegemony has been doing this for thousands of years. Earth is just the latest target. But why us? Why now?" Because we are strong, we are intelligent, and apparently we make good workers. Rodriguez's voice was bitter. They have been watching us for decades, waiting for the right time to harvest us. Sarah looked at the images of enslaved aliens and felt anger building in her chest. These creatures had treated entire civilizations like livestock. They had turned thinking beings into property. "Sir," she said slowly, "what if we could reverse their technology? Instead of them controlling us, what if we could control them?" Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "The neural collars. They are designed to suppress free will and create obedience. But the basic technology is just electronic control of nervous systems. If we could modify the frequency, adjust the output, you could turn their own weapons against them." "It is just a theory, sir. I would need time to study the devices, and we would need test subjects." Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Doctor, we have 3 live aliens upstairs and more coming every hour. As our forces capture their soldiers, you will have all the test subjects you need." "Sir, that would be experimenting on sentient beings. The ethical implications—" "Doctor," Rodriguez said quietly, "they came here to make us slaves. They have enslaved countless other species. Ethics went out the window when they fired the first shot." Sarah nodded reluctantly. She thought about the images of defeated aliens wearing slave collars, about the billions of beings who had lost their freedom to the Keth Mori, about Earth's children who would grow up as property if the aliens succeeded. "I will need a full laboratory, computer access, and a team of specialists. You will have whatever you need. Doctor, how long before you can give us something useful?" Sarah looked at the wall display showing incoming alien reinforcements. "Give me 72 hours. You have 24. Sir, that is not nearly enough time to—" Another explosion shook the building. Dust fell from the ceiling as emergency alarms began wailing. "Doctor," Rodriguez said firmly, "you have 24 hours, because that is how long our computers estimate before the alien reinforcements arrive. After that, there might not be a free human left on Earth to benefit from your research." Sarah looked around the command center. Every person in the room was working desperately to save their species from slavery. She thought about her younger brother in college, her parents in California, all the people she loved who would become property of alien masters if she failed. "I understand, sir. 24 hours. As she left the command center, Sarah's mind was already racing with possibilities. The alien technology was advanced, but it was still just technology. Humans had always been good at taking things apart and putting them back together in new ways. The aliens had made a mistake coming to Earth. They had expected to find a primitive species that would break easily under pressure. Instead, they had found humans. And humans, Sarah reflected grimly, had spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to turn the tools of their enemies against them. Time to teach the galaxy what that meant. Captain Maria Santos had never expected to be fighting aliens in space. 3 days ago, she had been commanding a nuclear submarine in the Pacific Ocean. Now she was leading a boarding party through the corridors of an alien spacecraft using weapons that had been science fiction just hours before. The ship's artificial gravity felt strange under her feet. Too light, like walking on the moon. The walls curved in ways that hurt her eyes to look at, and the air smelled like copper and ozone. "Contact ahead," whispered Sergeant Murphy through her headset. 2 hostiles, moving toward Section 7. Maria raised her hand to signal the team to stop. They were carrying a mix of human and alien weapons now. The energy rifles they had taken from dead Keth Mori soldiers were powerful, but they had limited ammunition. The modified neural collars that Dr. Chen's team had developed were their secret weapon. "Remember the plan," Maria said quietly. "We take them alive if possible, dead if necessary, but we need their command codes." Her team nodded. They had been volunteers from the most elite special forces units on Earth, Rangers, SEALs, SAS, Spetsnaz. All of them had trained for impossible missions, but nothing had prepared them for this. The Kethmori ship had been damaged in the initial fighting and forced to land in Nevada. Instead of trying to destroy it, General Rodriguez had ordered it. Captured intact, he wanted the technology, the intelligence, and most importantly, proof that humans could beat the aliens at their own game. Maria's team moved forward through the ship's twisting corridors. The design made no sense from a human perspective. Doors that opened sideways instead of up and down, control panels mounted on the ceiling, everything built for creatures with 4 arms and different body proportions. "Captain," came Dr. Chen's voice through the radio, "remember that their neural structure is different from ours. The modified collars should work, but the effect might not be immediate." "Understood, Doc. How many hostiles are we looking at?" "Thermal scans show approximately 30 Kethmori still alive on the ship. Most are wounded. They have barricaded themselves in the command center." Maria smiled grimly. Barricades were something humans understood very well. Her team had explosives that could crack any door, and tactics that had been tested in urban warfare around the world. They reached the command center after 10 minutes of careful movement. The door was sealed with some kind of energy field that sparked and hummed with power. Sergeant Rodriguez, the team's demolitions expert, studied it with professional interest. "Looks like a fusion containment field," he said. "But they are using it backwards, trying to keep us out instead of keeping plasma in. Can you break it? Give me 5 minutes and some of those alien power cells we captured." While Rodriguez worked on the door, Maria studied the tactical situation. Her team was just one of dozens that had been organized in the past 72 hours. Around the world, human forces were adapting alien technology with frightening speed. The Russians had figured out how to mount alien energy weapons on their tanks. The Chinese were mass-producing modified neural collars based on Dr. Chen's designs. The Americans had cracked the aliens' computer systems and were reading their communications in real time. Most impressive was what the Europeans had done. A joint team of scientists from CERN had taken apart an alien fusion reactor and rebuilt it to power their particle accelerator. They were using the Large Hadron Collider to create new types of ammunition that could penetrate any known alien armor. "Door is ready," Rodriguez announced. "Remember," Maria told her team, "these things are dangerous when cornered. They might have weapons we have not seen yet." The energy field collapsed with a sound like breaking glass. Maria's team moved through the doorway with practiced efficiency, covering all angles and securing the room in seconds. The Kethmori command center was larger than expected, filled with displays and control panels that glowed with alien symbols. 28 Kethmori were inside, most of them wounded and all of them clearly terrified. One of the aliens, wearing more elaborate armor than the others, stepped forward and began speaking in their clicking language. "Translation coming through," Dr. Chen's voice said over the radio. "He is asking for terms of surrender." Maria felt a moment of satisfaction. The mighty Kethmori, who had enslaved entire civilizations, were asking to surrender to humans. "Tell him they will be treated according to the Geneva Convention," Maria replied. "But first, they need to hand over all their command codes and star charts." The alien commander's large black eyes blinked rapidly as the translation reached him. He spoke again, more urgently this time. "He is saying that their fleet will return with more ships, that resistance is futile, that we should surrender now and accept slavery, because the alternative is extinction." Maria laughed. "Tell him he has that backwards. We are not the ones who should be worried about extinction." Over the past 3 days, human forces had captured 47 alien ships. Some had been shot down, others had been boarded and taken by force. Each capture had provided more technology, more intelligence, and more proof that the Kethmori were not invincible. "Captain," Rodriguez called from one of the alien control panels, "I think I found something interesting." Maria moved to his position. The display showed a star map with hundreds of marked systems. Some were colored red, others blue, and a few were marked with special symbols. What am I looking at? According to the computer, red systems are enslaved worlds. Blue systems are Keth Mori colonies. The special symbols mark their main bases and staging areas. Maria studied the map with growing excitement. This was not just tactical intelligence. This was a roadmap to the entire Keth Mori Empire. How many enslaved worlds? Rodriguez worked with the alien computer for several minutes, his face growing pale as he read the data. Captain, there are over 300 marked systems. Each one represents billions of enslaved beings. My God. There is more. This ship's computer has been keeping records of their operations. How many slaves they have taken from each world. How many have died in their mines and factories. How many children have been born into slavery. Maria felt anger building in her chest. The scale of the Keth Mori crimes was beyond anything in human history. Even the worst dictators and genocidal maniacs had never operated on this level. Are there any free worlds? Anyone fighting back? A few. Most get enslaved eventually. But, Captain, there is something else. Something important. Rodriguez brought up a new display showing recent communications from the Keth Mori fleet. They are calling for help, not just military reinforcements. They are asking for specialists in dealing with aggressive species and psychological warfare experts. They think we are too dangerous to be normal slaves. Yes, but that is not the important part. Look at this. The display changed to show a list of ship movements and resource allocations. The Keth Mori were pulling forces from dozens of systems to deal with the Earth situation. They are weakening their defenses everywhere else, Maria realized. If we could get this information to other enslaved worlds, they might have a chance to rebel. Captain, we could start a galactic revolution. Maria looked at the star map. Again, thinking about billions of enslaved beings waiting for someone to break their chains. The Keth Mori had made a critical error when they attacked Earth. They had expected to find another helpless species to add to their collection. Instead, they had found humans, and humans had a long history of fighting for the freedom of others, not just themselves. Rodriguez, can you download all of this data? Already working on it, Captain, but we are going to need a way to transmit it across interstellar distances. Leave that to the eggheads back home. Our job is to secure this intelligence and get it back to command. Maria turned to the captured Keth Mori commander. Through the translation system, she asked him a direct question. How many more ships are coming to Earth? The alien's response was immediate and desperate. He says 500 ships, a full battle fleet. They will arrive in less than 48 hours. Tell him it does not matter, Maria replied calmly. Tell him that humans do not surrender, ever. And tell him that by the time his reinforcements arrive, we will be ready for them. As her team secured the alien ship and prepared to transport their prisoners back to Earth, Maria thought about what was coming. 500 ships was a massive force, bigger than anything humanity had ever faced. But the aliens were making the same mistake they had made from the beginning. They were thinking like slavers, not warriors. They expected fear and submission. They were about to learn that humans responded to threats very differently than the other species they had conquered. Maria smiled as she looked at the star charts showing hundreds of enslaved worlds. The Keth Mori thought they were bringing reinforcements to crush human resistance. What they were actually doing was delivering more ships for humans to capture, more technology for human engineers to study, and more opportunities for humanity. To prove that some species were not meant to be slaves. Some species were meant to be liberators. General James Rodriguez stood in the command center of the USS Enterprise, humanity's first captured alien mothership. Around him, human technicians worked alongside freed alien slaves to prepare for the largest military operation in Earth's history. The ship had once been called the Kolthara by its Keth Mori crew. Now it served as the flagship of the Terran Liberation Fleet, a force that included captured alien vessels, modified human warships, and volunteer crews from dozens of freed species. "Status report," Rodriguez called out. "Hyperspace generators are online," reported Commander Park, formerly of the South Korean Navy. "Weapon systems are charged and ready. All fighter squadrons are prepared for launch." Rodriguez nodded and turned to the being standing beside him. Velkara had been a slave of the Keth Mori for 30 years before human forces freed her from a transport ship. She was tall and blue-skinned, with 6 arms and eyes that could see across multiple light spectra. She had become his most valuable advisor. "What can you tell us about the target system?" Rodriguez asked. Velkara manipulated the holographic display with 4 of her hands while making notes with the other 2. "Kepler 442b is a primary slave processing world. The Keth Mori bring new captives there for conditioning before shipping them to work sites across the galaxy." "How many prisoners?" "Approximately 50 million beings from over 100 different worlds. The facilities are heavily guarded, but the defenses are designed to keep slaves in, not invaders out." Rodriguez studied the tactical display. The Liberation Fleet consisted of 200 ships, including 60 captured Keth Mori vessels that had been upgraded with human technology. It was the largest space force humanity had ever assembled, but it was still smaller than what the aliens could bring to bear if they had time to organize. That was why speed was essential. Human forces had been conducting hit-and-run attacks across Keth Mori space for the past 2 weeks, freeing slaves and capturing technology. Each operation had been planned to look random, disguising the true target until it was too late for the aliens to respond. "All ships report ready," announced Lieutenant Chen, Dr. Sarah Chen's younger brother who had volunteered for space duty. "We have volunteers from 43 liberated species ready to assist with prisoner transport and medical care." Rodriguez felt a moment of pride as he looked around the command center. Humans worked alongside beings that looked like giant insects, living trees, and creatures made of living crystal. All of them united by one goal: ending the Keth Mori slave trade forever. "Begin the operation," Rodriguez ordered. The Liberation Fleet jumped to hyperspace in perfect formation. The sensation was like being turned inside out while falling through a tunnel of stars. Rodriguez had never gotten used to it, but the alien crew members seemed to find it routine. "Hyperspace transit complete," reported Commander Park. "We are at the edge of the Kepler 442 system." Scanner readings, orbital defenses around the slave processing planet, approximately 40 Keth Mori ships on patrol, station facilities on the surface that match our intelligence reports. Rodriguez smiled grimly. The Keth Mori had never faced an attack on one of their core worlds. Their defenses were designed to intimidate slaves and deter pirates, not to fight a real military force. "Begin Phase 1. All stealth ships, move to attack positions." The human-designed stealth ships were barely visible even to advanced sensors. They had been built using a combination of human radar-absorbing technology and alien cloaking devices. Each ship carried enough firepower to cripple a Keth Mori vessel before the enemy knew they were under attack. "Stealth units in position," came the report. Phase 2. Broadcast the liberation signal. Velkara activated a complex piece of equipment that had been built specifically for this mission. It transmitted a message in over 200 languages to every receiver in the system. "Attention, all enslaved beings. This is the Terran Liberation Fleet. We are here to free you. Stay calm and follow the instructions of Liberation personnel. Your slavery is over." On the tactical display, Rodriguez watched as the message spread across the planet's surface. In slave compounds around the world, beings who had given up hope of freedom were hearing that help had finally arrived. "Enemy ships are responding," reported the tactical officer. "They are moving to intercept. All ships, attack formation Alpha. Let them come to us." The battle that followed was unlike anything the Keth Mori had ever experienced. Human tactics focused on speed, surprise, and overwhelming firepower concentrated at critical points. Instead of the traditional alien approach of gradual escalation, human forces hit with everything they had from the beginning. Stealth ships appeared from nowhere to destroy Keth Mori patrol vessels before they could send warning signals. Modified human fighters swarmed the alien ships like angry wasps, too small and fast for the heavy weapons to target effectively. Most devastating were the new weapons that human engineers had developed. Kinetic kill vehicles that used alien fusion, technology to accelerate chunks of metal to near-light speed, quantum torpedoes that could phase through shields and explode inside enemy ships, viral computer programs that could take control of alien systems and turn their own weapons against them. Enemy flagship is requesting terms for surrender, reported Lieutenant Chen. Tell them the terms are simple, Rodriguez replied. Release all slaves immediately. Provide access to all slave transportation records. Submit to arrest and trial for crimes against sentient beings. The response came back quickly. The Keth Mori commander refused to surrender and threatened to execute prisoners if the attack continued. Rodriguez felt his jaw tighten. This was the moment he had been preparing for, the choice between saving some slaves now or ending the slave trade forever. Velkara, can you get us through their shields? The blue-skinned alien worked with her computer interface for several minutes. Yes, General, but we will need to get very close to their command ship. Do it! The Enterprise accelerated toward the Keth Mori flagship, dodging energy beams and missile attacks. The alien ship was massive, the size of a small city, but human engineers had identified its weak points. Transporter ready, reported Commander Park. Team Alpha, prepare for boarding action. Rodriguez led the boarding party himself, along with volunteers from dozens of species. They materialized inside the Keth Mori command ship and immediately came under fire. The fighting that followed was brutal and close quarters. Keth Mori soldiers were dangerous opponents, but they had never faced enemies who fought with the desperation of beings whose entire species had been threatened with slavery. Bridge secured, Rodriguez reported as the last alien defender fell. Beginning data extraction, the computer systems on the Keth Mori flagship contained information about slave operations across the entire galaxy. Transport schedules, facility, locations, population counts, and most importantly, the locations of other slave worlds that could be liberated. General, called out Specialist Martinez from one of the computer terminals, you need to see this. Rodriguez moved to the display, which showed a list of recent communications from Keth Mori High Command. They are pulling forces from across the galaxy to deal with us, Martinez explained. Over 2,000 ships are being redirected to hunt down the Liberation Fleet. That means 2,000 ships that are not guarding slave worlds, Rodriguez realized. Exactly, sir. If we can coordinate simultaneous uprisings on multiple worlds. Rodriguez smiled as he understood the implications. The Keth Mori were making the same mistake that many oppressors throughout history had made. They were responding to resistance with more force, not realizing that their strength was also their weakness. Velkara, how many of the enslaved species have the technical knowledge to operate captured ships? Most of them, General. The Keth Mori use slaves for technical work. Many of my people are engineers, pilots, and scientists. Then we are not just liberating prisoners. We are recruiting an army. As the Liberation Fleet secured the Kepler 442 system and began the process of freeing 50 million slaves, Rodriguez looked at the star charts showing hundreds of other worlds still under Keth Mori control. Each liberated world would provide more ships, more knowledge, and more volunteers for the growing resistance movement. The Keth Mori had built their empire on the assumption that enslaved beings would remain passive and broken. They were about to learn what happened when slaves realized they outnumbered their masters by 1,000 to 1. All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump, Rodriguez ordered. We have a revolution to start. Behind them, 50 million newly freed beings looked up at the stars and realized that freedom was possible. Ahead of them, hundreds of other worlds waited for liberation. The Kethmori had created their own destruction the moment they decided to attack Earth. They had awakened a species that refused to accept slavery, not just for themselves, but for anyone. And now that species was teaching the galaxy what freedom looked like. Commander HFY stared at the tactical display in his private quarters, watching the red markers that represented defeated Kethmori forces disappear one by one from the galactic map. In 6 months, the humans had accomplished something that no species in recorded history had ever managed. They had broken the Kethmori hegemony. His ship, the Tormecha, was one of only 12 vessels that remained from the original Earth expedition. The rest of his fleet was either destroyed, captured, or had joined the growing rebellion that was sweeping across the galaxy. "Commander," came the voice of his aide, Sub-Commander Kextal, through the door speaker. "You asked to be informed. When we reached the border of hegemony space." "Enter," HFY said wearily. Kextal stepped into the room, his 4 arms carrying data tablets and his large black eyes showing the strain of the past months. Like all Kethmori, he had been raised to believe in the absolute superiority of their species. The last 6 months had shattered that belief completely. "Status report," HFY requested, though he dreaded hearing it. "We have lost contact with the Velhara sector. The entire Third Fleet has either been destroyed or has surrendered to human forces. The mining worlds of Gamma Serpentis have declared independence. And, sir," Kextal paused, his voice breaking, "the home system is under attack." HFY closed his eyes. Kethmori Prime, the homeworld of their species, was supposed to be impregnable, protected by the most advanced defenses in the galaxy and surrounded by hundreds of warships. If the humans had reached even there— "How?" he asked quietly. "The Velkaran uprising, sir. When the humans freed them from the Kepler 442 facility, they provided detailed intelligence about our defensive networks. The liberated species know all our weaknesses because we made them build our defenses. Of course, the Kethmori had used slave labor for everything, including the construction of their most secret military installations. Every enslaved engineer, every forced laborer, every broken scientist had been storing knowledge about Kethmori technology and defenses, knowledge that was now being used against them. "What are our orders from High Command?" HFY asked. Kextal looked uncomfortable. "There is no more High Command, sir. The ruling council was captured 3 days ago when human forces took the capital city. The humans they are putting them on trial. Trial? For crimes against sentient beings. They have established something called a Galactic Justice Tribunal. Representatives from every species we ever enslaved are serving as judges." HFY felt a chill run through his body. The humans were not just winning the war, they were completely restructuring galactic civilization. Instead of simply replacing the Kethmori as the dominant species, they were creating something entirely new, a system where all species were equal. "Sir," Kextal continued, "we are receiving a transmission from a human vessel. They are requesting permission to come aboard." "What? Why would they want to board our ship?" "I believe they want to negotiate our surrender, sir." HFY looked around his quarters. The walls were covered with honors and decorations from successful slave raids, certificates of merit for efficient population harvesting, images of conquered worlds and broken species. All of it meaningless now. Tell them they may come aboard." An hour later, HFY stood in his ship's main hangar as a small human craft docked with the Tormecha. He had expected to meet human soldiers, perhaps the same brutal warriors who had devastated his forces at Earth. Instead, a single human woman emerged from the craft, accompanied by 2 beings that HFY recognized with shock. One was Velkara, a Velkaran slave who had been processed through his facilities years ago. The other was a Thraknari, a species that the Kethmori had enslaved so long ago that HFY had never seen a free one. The human was tall and confident, wearing a uniform that combined human and alien elements. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, and her eyes held the weight of someone who had seen too much war. "Commander Zexhai," she said in perfect Keth Mori language, "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Liberation Fleet." Zexhai remembered that name from intelligence reports. The human scientist who had first figured out how to reverse their neural control technology. She had been personally responsible for freeing millions of slaves. "Admiral," he replied, trying to maintain some dignity. "I suppose you are here to accept my surrender." "Actually, no," Chen said, surprising him. "I am here to offer you a choice." "I do not understand." Chen gestured to her companions. "Velkara here was enslaved by your forces for 30 years. Grekmore lost his entire family to Keth Mori slave. Raids. They have every reason to hate you and your species." Zexhai looked at the two former slaves, expecting to see anger and hatred in their eyes. Instead, he saw something more disturbing. Pity. "But they also understand something that your species never learned," Chen continued. "That breaking the cycle of violence is more important than revenge. What are you proposing?" "Integration. Your species can join the new Galactic Confederation as equals. Help us rebuild what your empire destroyed. Use your knowledge of the galaxy to help locate remaining slave populations and free them." Zexhai's mind reeled. "You would trust us after everything we have done?" "Trust must be earned," Chen replied. "But everyone deserves a chance at redemption, even slavers. And if we refuse?" Chen's expression hardened. "Then you will be treated as war criminals, tried, convicted, and imprisoned for the rest of your lives. Your species will be quarantined to your homeworld until you learn to live peacefully with others." Zexhai looked around his ship, thinking about his crew. Most of them were young Keth Mori who had been born into the slave empire. They had never known any other way of life. Did they deserve to be punished for the crimes of their ancestors? "What would integration involve?" he asked. Velkara stepped forward. "Truth and reconciliation, Commander. Your people would have to acknowledge the crimes committed against enslaved species, make reparations where possible, and commit to never engaging in slavery again. Many of your people will resist this," Grekmore added in his deep, rumbling voice. "But the alternative is extinction. The liberated species outnumber the Keth Mori by thousands to one. You cannot win through force." Zexhai thought about the reports he had received over the past months. Human tactics were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They did not fight to conquer or enslave. They fought to liberate. And once they freed a species, that species became part of their growing alliance. The humans had created something that the Keth Mori had never understood: willing cooperation between equals. It was more powerful than any slave empire because it was based on choice rather than force. If I were to accept this offer," Zexhai said slowly, "what would happen to my crew?" "Those who cooperate will be allowed to join the Confederation after a period of rehabilitation and education," Chen replied. "Those who do not will face trial for war crimes. The choice is individual, but it must be made freely." Zexhai activated his ship's internal communication system. "All crew, this is the commander. Report to the main assembly hall immediately." 20 minutes later, Zexhai stood before his remaining crew of 300 Keth Mori. They looked tired and defeated, but also curious about what their leader would tell them. "We have lost," he said simply. "Our empire is gone. Our way of life is finished. But we have been offered something unexpected, a chance to be part of something better." He explained the human offer, watching the expressions on his crew's faces. Some looked angry, others seemed relieved, a few appeared confused by the very concept of voluntary cooperation between species. "I am going to accept their offer," Zexhai announced. "Not because I have no choice, but because I have finally learned something that should have been obvious from the beginning. Slavery is wrong. What we did to countless billions of beings was wrong. And if we have a chance to help undo that damage, we should take it. The vote was not unanimous. 57 crew members chose to face trial rather than accept human terms. But the majority, including many of the younger Kethmori, voted to join the rehabilitation program. As Admiral Chen's ship prepared to escort the Tormecha to a Confederation processing facility, HFY stood on his bridge one last time as a Kethmori commander. "Admiral," he called out over the communication link, "I have one question." "What is that, Commander?" "Why? Why show mercy to a species that showed none to others?" Chen's voice was thoughtful when she replied. "Because someone has to break the cycle. Because revenge only creates more enemies. And because we learned something. From our own history, the best way to defeat an enemy is to turn them into a friend." As the small convoy jumped to hyperspace, HFY thought about the irony of the situation. The Kethmori had come to Earth seeking slaves and had instead found teachers. Teachers who had shown the galaxy that there was a better way to live than through domination and fear. Behind them, across hundreds of worlds, billions of former slaves were building new societies based on freedom and cooperation. Ahead of them lay the possibility of redemption and a chance to help heal the wounds that the Kethmori Empire had inflicted on the galaxy. It would not be easy. Many species would never forgive the Kethmori for what they had done. But at least, now there was hope for something better than endless cycles of oppression and revenge. The humans had kept their promise. They had come for slaves and found guardians. They had sought servants and become liberators. And in doing so, they had changed not just their own fate, but the destiny of every species in the galaxy. Some species, HFY realized, were not meant to be caged. They were meant to break the cages of others, and once those cages were broken, they showed everyone what freedom truly meant.